The journey we're taking is the journey within you. Everybody has their own story and their own journey to share. Every journey conceals another journey within its lines. The path not taken and the forgotten angle. Listen to the stories from others sharing their triumphs and struggles that led them to where they are today. Welcome to the journey within you. And I have the pleasure of having Kelci with us today. And sometimes our stories are of joy and happiness, and sometimes they're of struggles and things that are happening in our lives. So let's bring Kelci in. Hey, Kelci. And I
Hey,
just
Laura.
wanted to bring her in because I saw her story on Facebook. And there was something there that just told me she needs to share her story because there's so many women out there, unfortunately, that are going through what Kelci is going through. And I want to read a little portion here that caught my eye on one of her posts. And of course, it went away. Let me bring it back up. It was just beautiful. And I thought I'd share it. It's not letting me go there. Let's see. Here it goes. I think you just did a trip to Mexico, so you can talk about that a little bit later too. But she was sitting out by the water, and that's kind of like one of my things, cover me in sunshine. And it said, when my husband Colin passed, I was paralyzed with fear of the future, fear of the unknown, and fear of knowing who was I going to be now. And we started dating when they were 20 years old. She didn't know how she was going to do life without him being there. You know, they're a part of your life in so many ways. You become one. And so she's discovering a new journey of healing and self-discovery. And she's pretty proud of the woman she's becoming. And I think that is so beautiful because a lot of times people don't think they can find themselves again. So Kelci, I would love, you get to see my dog. I would love for you to share your story with us today.
Sure. So, my husband and I met in college. Well, I was in college. I actually am 2 years older than him. So I was 20 and he was 18, and I was going to nursing school at San Diego State, and he had just graduated from high school. And we met, and it was pretty much love at first sight. I saw him, he saw me, and yeah, we just
Wow.
connected. And then it was like from our first date on, it was like we were together. And we
Awesome.
dated for 2 years. Then he left and went and served a 2-year mission for our church. And then when he
Wow.
returned, we were married 3 months later. So we have four
Wow.
beautiful, rambunctious boys. Our oldest is 18, and then we have
4 boys.
yes, 16, 13, and 10. So they are very active,
Mm.
very rambunctious, and a lot of fun. Drive me crazy sometimes, but they're a lot of fun. So my
Mhm.
husband and I are both
Mhm.
from Southern California. So we'd lived there our entire lives, had all our boys there. And then we felt in 2018, we felt like we were supposed to leave California, which was not something that I really wanted to recognize because we were both born and raised there. Our families were there, our friends were there. We didn't think that we were going to go anywhere else. Our plan was to stay. Um, but there was no denying the pull. So we ended up, it was very apparent. You can call it the universe. I call it God,
Mhm.
um, directed us to move to Northeast Florida.
Wow.
So in December of 2019, we moved from California. We didn't have a job here or anything. We had our own business, so we could pretty much live anywhere. Didn't know
Mhm.
anybody, packed up our family, and we moved across the country. That was very difficult,
Wow.
huge leap of faith.
Mhm.
We were here for a few months. COVID happened. Everybody knows, how that went. And then in August of
Mhm.
2020,
Mhm.
amid
Yeah.
the COVID chaos, our two oldest sons, Ian and Luca, were in a motor vehicle accident. And it was Luca sustained some very
Mm.
severe injuries, required multiple surgeries. Um, Ian had a traumatic brain injury. He was the only, there were
Mm.
6 people in the accident. He was the only person in the accident that hit their head. And so I'm in the ER with both of them, and the doctor scan of Ian's head, and
Mm.
he says to me, has Ian ever had a scan of his brain before? And this was after he had like gone. And as soon as he said that, I knew, like my heart just sunk and I knew that something was wrong. And I said, no, why? And he said, well, he has a 2-inch brain tumor in his right frontal lobe of his brain right here. And
Mm.
he had no symptoms, none at all. We had no idea he had this tumor growing inside of his brain.
Wow.
So poor Luca,
No.
his brother, was collateral
Mm.
damage, but the accident
Mm.
actually saved his life. So Ian, I've got one going off to
Mm.
surgery here, and the other one, the brain surgeon's being called in. And I'm like, what is going on? And it was during COVID, so they wouldn't let both parents be there. So I'm there alone. My husband's at home with the other two. And it was a really
Mm.
scary, really traumatic time. Um, Fast forward, Ian had brain surgery. They were successfully able to remove the tumor.
Praise God.
And after 2 weeks of like the longest 2 weeks of my life to find out the pathology on the brain tumor, we found out that it was benign. So thankfully, because they were able to remove it all, he did not require any further treatment, um, besides, recovery from the
Right.
surgery. So he recovered from the surgery, had therapy. Um, Luca, who sustained multiple injuries, had a couple more surgeries, went through physical therapy, lots of pain, and it was hard. It was a
Mm.
really, really hard 4 months. And then things kind of started to settle down. It
Mm.
was December of 2020, and I'm like, I'm so ready for 2021. Like, hopefully COVID will be
Christmas.
gone, and like my kids will be healthy and everything will be back to normal. And on New Year's Eve, my husband had not been
Mhm.
feeling great like leading up to Christmas, but um it was just like he was just saying like he had like some muscle aches and such. It wasn't anything like major. And but on Christmas Eve he spiked a fever, and I was like, oh, well, you must have the flu.
Mhm.
So he just like took some Tylenol, and we did our
Mm.
thing. And
Mm.
um he just New Year's Day came, and he was like getting worse. And then January 2nd of 2021, I was like, I think you need to go to the emergency room. It was a weekend, so his regular doctor wasn't on, and I felt like he needed more than just urgent care. So I was like, I think you
Mm.
need to go to the emergency room. And it's like, I'll take you. And he's like, no, no, I'm fine. I'll just drive myself. So he took himself to the emergency room, and we both thought it was just going to be real fast, like he'd be home in a few hours.
Mhm.
He texted me and was like keeping me updated. They got me back really fast. They're doing blood work, blah, blah, blah. I should be home in a few hours. And then a couple hours go by and I didn't hear anything. And so I'm
Mm.
texting him and he doesn't respond. So then I call
Mm.
him and he doesn't answer the phone.
Oh
So now
gosh.
I'm starting to get a little worried.
Mhm.
And, now it's been 3, 4 hours since I heard from him. And so I called the emergency room that he was at, and his nurse happened to answer the phone. And she said, I'm so glad you called me because he didn't put your any emergency contact information down
Bless you.
when he checked in. Of course, of
Of course, man. No.
course. And so she's like, we didn't know who to call. But she
Oh.
said, your husband took a turn for the worse. And
Oh.
she said, I thought he was going to be in and out. You walked in and I was like, oh, he's going to be an easy patient. She said, all of a sudden, his fever went up to 104. He had 10 out of 10 pain. His blood pressure's through the roof. We don't know what's wrong with him. He's being admitted. And I'm like, oh, okay. And she said, but it's visiting hours are over with. You're gonna have to wait till the next morning. I was like, okay. So of course, the next morning, first thing I
Mm,
go. Um, it took about a week full of tests. First, they diagnosed him. Well, they didn't diagnose him. They treated him for sepsis. So he's getting, treatment for sepsis, and all the cultures are coming back and everything's coming back negative. So, but he's progressively getting worse. He's in the hospital. He's progressively getting worse. So they're doing
mhm,
all these tests. They're calling all these specialties in,
mm,
and they're just not finding anything
mm,
wrong with him. It took about a week, and they discovered that he had leukemia. So he had acute lymphoblastic leukemia,
mm,
and it's a very aggressive form of blood cancer. It's most common in children. It's the most
mm,
common kind of cancer in children. It's not common in adults. Children fare much better with the treatment for this type of leukemia than adults do. So
mhm,
he had a very poor prognosis.
mm, mm,
Um, they said he had about a 30% chance of surviving the year.
mm,
So, of course, we dive headfirst into chemotherapy and treatments and all our options. And was a very, very intense, hard, long road. He went into liver failure. He went into, he had pulmonary embolisms. He had infections, and I mean, just all the things. Um, he was in the hospital pretty much um, for the first half of 2021. And then he
mm,
started to get a
mm,
little bit better. He was still getting through treatments, but he was starting to stabilize. And he was able to come home. We finished out his treatments. And in October of 2021, they said that he had gone into remission. And we were so excited.
mm.
He still had to continue with
Yeah,
treatments, but they were lesser
yeah,
intense. And we were like, okay, like maybe we can start to finally getting back to normal life. It's been over
yeah,
a year since we've had normal life, not counting COVID, like that's a whole nother
right.
thing, but like
Yeah, that was yeah,
COVID normal, I guess, even though I hate that word.
yeah,
Um, so, he still was not, he was maybe like 50% of his strength, but, he
mm,
was able to do more things. And so we were so looking forward to 2022. I've learned not to look forward to years anymore.
yeah.
I'm like, the clock
Just
doesn't just strike and then
embrace
like everything
that.
changed. Like,
Yeah,
no. So
yeah.
I was so looking forward to 2022. I'm like, yes, it's gonna be so
We made
much
it through here.
better.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no. Um, January 7th of 2022, actually to the date of exact year from when he was first diagnosed with leukemia, we discovered that it was back.
Mm, mm,
And the doctor had warned us beforehand when he went into remission that if this comes back, it's most likely going to be fatal. Um,
mm,
so it was an extremely hard blow. Um, and it came back fast
mm.
and hard and angry. And
Aggressive.
2022, very aggressive.
Mm,
He had an infection in his bone, in his brain. He had a blood clot in his brain. He had like just so many times where they're like, the chemo's not working. So we're going to try this immunotherapy and that's not working. We think that there's nothing left we can do. And then all of a sudden, like a miracle would happen and he would come back. And when I say come back, he's not like 100%, but it was like,
mm-hmm.
okay, now the leukemia is starting to go back
Yeah.
down. So I think we're getting ahead of this. And then he would go into kidney failure and liver failure, and he was on dialysis and just so many things. It was so completely overwhelming, and it was so easy to just get consumed by all the darkness and
Mm-hmm.
all the
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
like discouragement, and it just felt like the universe was against us.
Mm.
Um, but I noticed that when I allowed those thoughts to get in my head, I wasn't able to be the wife that he needed to be. I wasn't able to be there for him. I wasn't able to be the
Right.
mom that my kids needed me. I wasn't even able to be there for myself.
Exactly.
And so I made a very conscious effort every single day. And I'm not saying that I was perfect at it or that I didn't, sometimes fall, because I did. But
Hmm.
every single day, I made a very conscious effort to look for the light. And that kind of became like my tagline, look for the light, because
Yeah.
that was the only thing that got me through the days,
Ooh,
because it was very easy to see all the darkness.
the dark. How did your kids do through this part? When you do feel all that
Um,
darkness, did you change and shift with
you
them
know,
also?
kids, kids are very resilient.
They
Um,
are. They are.
and I have amazing children. But of course it affected them.
Mm,
I mean, not only did they not like have dad home, dad was
mhm.
in the hospital pretty much for the entire year of 2022. Um, but I was with him at the hospital. Like I would come home at dark and I would get up before
Yeah.
light. And I basically lived at the hospital aside from sleeping there.
Right.
And my amazing mother and my mother-in-law would take turns
Mhm.
coming. They both live out of state. They would take turns coming and taking care of the kids to try to give them some sort of normalcy. But it was hard. The kids, I tried as much as I could to make their
Yeah.
life not disrupted, but it was disrupted. And
Mhm. But how
they suffered a lot,
yeah,
panic
yeah.
attacks, sadness, uh, all the things that you would
Mm,
expect. Um, but I was very open with the boys
right.
on
Yeah. Yeah.
sharing the miracles that I would see daily.
Good.
And some of them were
Mhm.
big, some of them were little.
Yeah.
But the more that I noticed the miracles or the light, um, the more I saw. So it was very easy to see the darkness. It wasn't as easy to see the light, but the more I
Mhm.
looked for the light, the easier it became to see and the more
Yeah.
I saw. And that shift
Yeah.
in perspective is really what saved me.
Mm,
I mean, it really is,
mm.
because I found myself when I was so traumatized still
Yeah.
from my boy's accident and my son's brain tumor when my
Right.
husband was diagnosed.
You're like,
It, it,
"How do I
it,
function?" Yeah.
it was consuming. Like I wasn't functioning. When
Mm,
he first was diagnosed, I wasn't functioning. There were days when I could not get out of bed and I
mm,
wanted to be there for him at the hospital. And I felt terrible that I could not physically get out of bed, but
mhm.
I couldn't. And my kids would come in and I could see the fear in their eyes that not only were they going to potentially lose their dad, but they
But they
were
were losing.
also losing their mother.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm,
And I saw that and I was like, no, like this cannot happen. Like, so I put in the work, and like I said, I'm not perfect. I would fall down all the time. I still do.
mhm.
Um, but when I made that shift in perspective, that's when everything changed for me. And I
Mhm.
went from non-functioning to functioning.
Mm,
Um, But let me get back to the story. So my husband relapsed. He was very sick in 2022. Um, Went up and down, up and down. He needed a bone marrow transplant, had a match, but needed to be his leukemia needed to be under control, under a certain percentage to be able to go through the treatments. And it had spread to his liver. The leukemia had spread to his liver. So he never was able to get to that point. And he passed away in July of
mm,
2022. So just about 10 months ago. Um, and
mm.
it's, our journey is so complicated and so tragic, but it's so beautiful all at the same time. There is
Mm,
our 20-year
yeah.
anniversary is coming up in a few weeks, and I've been reflecting on that a lot.
Oh,
Um, and I'm just like, I would, I would not give up just 1 year with him. I mean, I would go through all this, even if it just meant that I had 1 year with
mm,
him, if that makes sense. Um,
mhm, mhm,
all the
mhm.
pain and all the sorrow and all the despair and suffering is all worth it to even just
Yeah.
have 1 year with him.
Yeah.
And he still lives through my boys, and
Oh,
I'm we're trying to continue his legacy, in the way we live our life, and we
mm,
love fully and live big. And um my husband Colin, he loved everyone, and he was
mm,
literally everyone's best friend. Like, he has
mm.
this magic about him where every single person thought that they were his best friend because he made them feel that way. But in his mind,
That's
they
so
really were his best friends.
that's
So it wasn't fake.
yeah,
It wasn't
yeah.
pretend. It was completely genuine. And so we
Continuing.
try
Yeah.
to live our to continue living the way he did and continue his legacy. And
To
um, we have grown so much through our trials. And like you said in my post that I did, it was
mm,
the day before my birthday that I did that post. So I went to Mexico with some of my best
oh,
girlfriends um, over my birthday. And um, yeah, in that post, I was saying how I didn't, when he passed, I was just so paralyzed with
mm,
fear. I
mm,
didn't know how to continue living without him.
mhm.
I didn't know in so many ways. I didn't know how to be a mom without him. I didn't know how to, take care of our house and do all the, like, physical things by
Yeah, all
myself,
the
and
things.
having a
Yeah.
partner. And I mean, it's just like there's so much
Mhm,
financial situations, just so many things. But like, underneath on the basis of that is I didn't know who I was
yeah.
without him. Like,
Right.
we
Right.
grew up together. Like, I met him when I was 20. He was 18. Like, we were just babies. And there wasn't a time that I could ever remember where I thought of myself without
Without
thinking
that.
of
Yeah.
him
Yeah.
too. Like,
Yeah.
we were intertwined completely. And
Mhm,
so I
mhm,
didn't know who I was. And these last 10 months have been really a journey of
mm,
self-discovery of who I am as a standalone
mm.
person, who is Kelci
Right.
as a whole. And I've discovered that I am a whole person on my
Mhm.
own. I am a complete adult, a
Yeah.
complete functioning whole person. And
Yeah.
anybody that comes into my life is just to highlight that and just to add to, not because I need it, but because they add to it. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Um, yeah,
Right.
so it's been
Yes.
very hard,
Yes.
but it's been very beautiful at the same time. I don't recommend it on
Mhm,
anybody. I
mhm.
wish I didn't have to go through this,
You what?
but but I
No, no,
don't
no.
recommend this.
I mean,
I wish I didn't have to go through it, but the
right.
reality is it is what it is. It's our reality. And
Yeah.
so I might as well, I have a choice,
Right.
and I can, even not doing anything, even if I chose to do nothing, if I chose to stay in bed every day, I'm still making a choice to do that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I might as well make a choice to move
To
forward.
live.
And sometimes
Mhm,
I move, it's 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. It's not, but as long as I
mhm.
continue moving forward, and some days it's minute by minute or hour by hour. It's
Mm,
Here talking to you, I
mhm.
seem like I'm very like high functioning and normal. I would call myself a high functioning griever. And it's great at times, but sometimes it's not so good because people like
Yeah.
think that I'm fine. And I'm like, no, I'm not fine. Like my husband died. Like he just died. Like I know I seem okay, but I'm
Mhm.
really not. I'm
Mhm.
still very much grieving and going through the process. But yeah,
Grieving.
I
Mhm.
it's a choice that
And
I make
again, that
every day
back
to
to I'm sorry. I think we delay in talking, so I didn't mean to body. So that's why people, when they see you functioning like you are and you seem great and you're grieving still inside, they don't see that. And they think you're, well, she's grieved. She's doing great. I think I would see myself in that way of, because I am joyful. I look at the side of, I got to move forward. If I had to go through something like that, I don't know. I speak of it, but there's a lot to it. There's a lot to the process. And again, everybody's different. We can't put them in a box and say, this is how you're going to feel and this is how you're going to do. There's similarities, but everybody is different. Your relationship was different with your husband than some others, and all that just comes into play. You have boys involved. I know they're thriving now, but they have hard days too, I'm sure. Things
yes,
will hit them and they'll
absolutely.
be
They
like,
do.
Mom, yeah, yeah, has to
Yes.
be. And you
And to
got
that
coming up on your
point,
anniversary.
yes. Yeah. To that point, Laura, you're right. Everyone grieves differently. There's no wrong way
Mhm,
or right way to grieve, and everyone grieves differently. And grief isn't something that you get over. You don't ever get over grief. I will never
mm-mm,
get over this. It will just, I've just learning
mm-mm,
to take it with me and to continue
mhm,
on. I like
mhm.
to call it I
I
rise
like
with
that.
grief. So it's not
Yeah,
something that
that's good.
I'm ever
That's
is
good.
ever going to go away.
Mm-mm. What was your business that you guys had? You said you were self-employed.
So my husband started a kind of like a consulting and marketing company for in aerospace. So our
Oh,
business was called Aerofied.
mm-hmm.
Um, so that was like his baby.
Mm,
He was very much into that
mm,
industry.
yeah.
I got a degree in nursing and I worked as an RN in the pediatric intensive care unit. I was not so interested in aerospace. Um, so, and now I am actually starting my own grief and coaching, um, grief and loss coaching company, and it is called Rise with Grief. So I'm in the process of building my website and I'm writing a book and that's called A Million Miracles and the One That Never Came. And yeah, so I
Mm,
really feel called to help in the grief and loss um,
that's
corner of the
beautiful.
world. Because as I discovered in
Mm-hmm.
grieving, my grief started with diagnosis. Um, my grief started when my husband was diagnosed with cancer and our life completely changed and what was normal was no longer and our life was consumed with this cancer diagnosis and that's when the grief really started and I was mourning the loss of the life that we had before and and then of course I continued to grieve and it was a different type of loss when he passed away but I learned when I started grieving in this mourning process that there's not a whole lot of resources
No.
out there. And, there's therapists and there's books and there's this and that. But like all the therapists I talked to, they hadn't lost a
Mm,
spouse.
mm,
They didn't know what I was going through on a personal level.
mm-mm.
And they were great. They helped me,
Right.
but not in the way that I needed to
Yes.
be heard and understood.
Yeah.
They just didn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really feel called to start this new venture in my life, and I'm super excited about it.
Oh, I would be too. I think that's awesome because you are going to be meeting so many needs specifically to something that you saw wasn't being met. And
Hmm.
that's going to be a blessing to so many. And I know without your faith, things would have been much different. So having faith in
Hmm.
God and being able to lean on him and help him give you the strength to get through these days that you face every day. I definitely want the information when you get your website all set up and ready so we can make sure that gets part of the podcast so people can connect with you. Um,
Absolutely.
I just appreciate you, Kelci, for coming in and sharing your story. And when your book comes out, we need to know about that.
Yes, absolutely.
But
And
I
people can
appreciate you
follow
taking the
me and keep up to
time
date.
sharing the difficult times in your life that, and showing. Yeah, I know my talking is like delayed to you. I'm sorry.
I know it's delayed.
You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Um, Absolutely.
Little technology.
And what I was going to say
But
is
again, thank you.
people can follow me, and I'll keep, updates
On
the
Facebook.
book and everything on Facebook.
Okay.
It's just Kelci Jager, and also on Instagram, it's Jager, Jager.strong, and
Okay.
that's my Instagram handle. So I'm
Okay.
on both of those.
Okay. Awesome. I'll make sure those will be linked into the bottom of the, episode and they can just click on that and follow you.
Okay,
But again,
great.
thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Laura.
Thank you for joining my podcast today. We all have a story to share. Each story has purpose and makes an impact to you, the listener, creating a journey with passion and purpose. The journey we're taking is the journey within you. Please share with others and subscribe below.